So today, what I want to speak to you about is, what do you think is Judaism's central message? If you had to summarize it, the Torah's key belief or key message to the Jewish people, to the world, what would you say it is? If you had to summarize it in one sentence, what would you say? Any ideas? Yes?
Changing the world positively.
Changing the world positively. Can we be perhaps a bit more specific? In what way? Yes?
I'd go with Rabbi Hillel. That which is hateful to you, don't do to other people.
Nice. That which is hateful to you, don't do to other people. Or if you want to flip it on its head, love your neighbor as yourself. Who agrees with that? That's the key message of the Torah of Judaism. Anyone? Put your hands up. I asked this question to have the boys' school actually a few weeks ago, and they said, what one person said, chicken soup and chopped liver. I thought, you know what, I wouldn't say it's a nice Jewish thing, but it's not a central Jewish message. Anyone else?
I think it's about like being in a Jewish community and like making a proper relationship with God.
Okay.
Like doing the mitzvot.
Okay, there you go. Making a proper relationship with God, doing the mitzvot, the commandments. One more. Yes?
I think it's more being good for your community, not really your relationship with God, more about trying to spread goodness to the rest of the world.
And why do you think it's not about, why is God not part of the picture?
Because whilst it plays an important role in it for some people, not everyone believes in God, so you don't have to believe in God to be Jewish, to follow the rules to be part of it.
Right. Very, very interesting. Okay, fine. So we've had some interesting concepts. Some people have been stressing the concept of God more. Some people have been stressing the concept of being good to other people. Here's what I think. And by the way, this is just my opinion, really. But this is what I think is perhaps the most central Jewish message, or at least one of the key central Jewish messages. Why do you think it is that the Torah is so focused around this story of the Jewish people leaving Egypt, leaving slavery and going into freedom as a nation? Why is that so important? Why does that play such a key role? But you know, it's not just, we're currently reading at the moment the weekly Torah portion that we read in synagogue. We're currently reading that part of the Torah where the Jews are enslaved, and right now we're getting to the part where they're about to receive the Torah at Mount Sinai once they've experienced freedom. And it's not just this part of the Torah, but so much of what makes up Jewish practice is centered around this concept of the Jewish people having this exodus from Egypt. So many of the mitzvot, the commandments that we're meant to do, are centered around or related to or harken back to this concept of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt. And the question is, why is that so important? For example, when we say the Shema in the morning and the evening, we reference the leaving of Egypt. The tefillin that Jewish men wear has references to leaving Egypt. Even when we say Kiddush, the sanctifying of wine, on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, which on the surface has nothing whatsoever to do with the exodus from Egypt. Even then we say Zeichel Yetziat Mitzrayim, in remembrance of the exodus from Egypt. What's that got to do with the Jewish New Year? For some reason, we are obsessed with this story of the Exodus. Why? Why is that so central to the Jewish story, to Jewish practice? What's going on here? So when Moses comes back from Midian, where he's sort of went into exile, and he comes back to Egypt, where he's been told by God to liberate the Jewish people. The Jewish people and the elders of the Jewish people don't believe him when he says, I'm coming to redeem you. But then he says a message that God told him to say to them, and it completely changes their whole perspective. He says two words, pokadati. God says, I've seen your suffering. And that suddenly completely changes their whole perspective, and now they start to suddenly listen to Moses. Why? What's so significant about that? He's saying, God has seen your suffering. And what's interesting is what happens next is you have the 10 plagues. And people think, what were the 10 plagues about? Is really just sort of trying to scare Pharaoh, trying to make him, encourage him, push him, force him to let the Jewish people go free. But actually, there are many deeper elements to it. Think about the first of the 10 plagues. What happened? The river turned to blood. The river Nile turned to blood. What would that mean? Don't forget that previously, the Egyptians had been throwing into the Nile baby Jewish boys. And the commentaries tell us that what actually happened was that Egyptians would go and grab the Jewish baby boys in the middle of the night, where no one could really see what was happening, what was going on. And by the morning, the Jewish parents have lost their child, and they don't know what's happened to them. There's rumours that maybe that it's going into the Nile or something like that, but they couldn't prove anything, and they end up feeling like they're going mad. It's absolutely traumatic. And suddenly, the River Nile turns to blood. In other words, the message was God was finally exposing the crime of genocide that the Egyptians carried out. What starts to happen in the story of the Exodus is a people who have been oppressed and experienced slavery and been downtrodden are starting to get the message that their Creator actually cares about them, actually wants a relationship with them, is actually looking out for them, and that there will be ultimate justice in the end, even if it doesn't happen immediately. And I think this goes back, I think this is really what the central Jewish message is. And I think it's this message that has transformed so much of humanity and humanity's values. And it's this key point. It's not just that the Jewish people believe in the concept of a God. It's that we believe in a God who cares about every single human being, who cares about people who are going through challenges and going through suffering, who cares about each individual. It's not just the concept of there's a God and he created the world. It's a concept that there's a God who cares. And people ask, what was it that made Abraham unique? What was Abraham, the very first Jew? What was his big revolutionary concept, his big revolutionary idea? And people say he came up with the concept of one God. That's not actually true. There were other people at the time who believed in the concept of one God. So what was it that was different about Abraham's concept? The difference in Abraham's concept was he said you can have a relationship with that God. That this God cares about us. And that's why in this week's Torah reading that we're going to read, which is Parshat Yisro, we're given the 10 Commandments. And the first of the 10 Commandments reads as follows: I am the Lord your God. And we would perhaps expect him to say, who created the heavens and the earth. But no, he says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. It's not just I'm the God who created everything and left the world to be as it is. I'm the Lord your God who is involved in the world. I care about you. I care about people who are going through challenges and suffering. I redeemed you. I redeemed you from Egypt. And that's the unique message of Judaism, and that's what changed the world. And that, by the way, is why it's said that the three major Jewish holidays, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, all of which are big holidays in which we remember the fact that we had an exodus from Egypt. It's the Talmud, the commentaries say that these holidays will actually no longer be necessary in the times of Moshiach, in the times of the Messiah, when the world will be at one with each other and at one with God, because the purpose of these holidays are to remind us of God's care for all human beings, but that will be so clear, so evident, that it won't be necessary in the future, in a future time. So this is really the essential message, I believe, of Judaism. And this message, I believe, had transformed the entire world. First of all, it transformed the Jewish people. It's something that allowed us to hold on and be steadfast through so many generations and centuries of challenges, of persecution, of being scattered throughout the world, being small in number, and being hated often wherever we go or don't go. And it's what's carried Jews through their darkest hours, this knowledge that even when things don't seem to make sense, even when things are difficult, the story of the Exodus is God says, I'm with you in your suffering. I'm with each and every individual person, and I care about them. And there is a divine guidance behind it. And it's this message which has allowed the Jewish people to inspire the majority of the world now to believe in the God of Abraham. Isn't that a crazy thing? Isn't that remarkable? Abraham, this guy who had no military might, who had no empire, who had, wasn't outstandingly wealthy, he transformed the world, the majority of the world now, through monotheistic offshoots like Christianity and Islam, believe in this God of Abraham. And it's interesting that we all agree, we use the word, the God of Abraham. And it's interesting that we use that word, Abraham. Why? Because that's the key part. The message of the God of Abraham is that God cares. God's involved in our lives, in the world. And it's this message of the Exodus, that God cares about the powerless, not just the powerful, that inspired other big liberation movements throughout history. It's amazing. The founders of America, their big, two of the founders of America wanted the emblem of the United States actually to be a picture of the splitting of the sea. And it was to say on it, disobedience to tyrants is obedience to God. That was going to be their emblem, but they went with something else in the end. But the founders of America were obsessed with creating almost this new promised land in America, free from the tyranny of the monarchies of Europe. They were inspired by this concept of the Exodus, of creating a new future of people. It's what inspired Martin Luther King when he wanted to liberate or end segregation and end the persecution of black people in America. He said in one of his final speeches, in fact, I think it was his very final speech, he quoted Moses in saying, "I've seen the promised land." It's what the black slaves of America used to sing. They sang this song, "Go down, Moses, way down to Egypt land, tell old Pharaoh to let my people go." That was a blues song that they sang as slaves, which they sang in order to inspire themselves that perhaps one day, like the ancient Israelites, they too could be free. And this message also, I think, changes your life as well, on a personal level. This notion that God cares about us on an individual level and is involved in each of our lives. Why? Because it gives you three key things. Number one, it gives you the knowledge that there will be ultimate justice, even if people don't experience ultimate justice in this world, because you believe in an afterlife. It's a knowledge that people will experience serenity, ultimately, even if they don't experience serenity in this world. It's also the knowledge that you have guidance in your life, that your life is being guided, that there's a purpose behind why things happen in your life, that it's not all just random and accidental, that there is a God who cares about you on an individual basis. And also it's the knowledge that you have a relationship with a being that is constant, a constant relationship of love, even if human relationships may fail you or if people pass on or die. And also it means that you have to care about other people too. And we talked just before about what is the Torah's message. Is it more about God or is it more about caring about other human beings? The truth is they're both intertwined. Because if God cares about all of us and is guiding all of our lives, that means we also have to care about each other because God cares about everyone. And so this message that God isn't just a being that existed and created the world, but it's a being that cares about each of us. A remarkable idea. The creator of the universe cares about me, you and I, cares about every single human being. Remarkable concept. It's quite crazy to think. But this Jewish message is something that's changed the world. Abraham, I would say, was perhaps the most influential man in all of human history. And yet, his descendants, the Jewish people, despite experiencing so many challenges throughout history, their messages has changed the world, has inspired so many liberation movements. But we still have more work to do. So the message I want to leave you with is to continue to explore your Jewish identity, continue to explore the messages within the Torah and what it has to offer you, but also what it has to offer other people too. So be sure to engage with it and continue to study it. And hopefully, as a result, we as a Jewish people can continue to change the world as well. So thank you.
To stay up to date with JTV content, click subscribe here if you're on YouTube and hit the alarm bell. And if you're on Facebook, hit the like button and under following, click See First. If you enjoy watching JTV content and want to help us continue to grow, please consider making a donation to us by clicking here.